Hi, we're gonna listen to BBC and please check out how many words you catch, how many sentences you catch or understand. Please focus on listening.
Small cup of ayahuasca, and then you wait for the medicine to take effect. The shaman is also an ex-professional musician, and his facilitators are also musicians. So they were playing incredibly beautiful music. Then all of a sudden I started to feel hot. I started to shake a little bit. Wondered whether or not I should have taken the second cup, but decided that it was too late for that. And yeah, I then started to experience, I would say, it was like going on a journey where I was experiencing pain.
Well, that's Richard Butler, who last year decided he wanted to go to Mexico on the kind of retreat that's becoming increasingly popular, where he'd take a psychoactive concoction derived from leaves and bark that's been used by indigenous people for centuries, and he talked there about a journey of pain. And Richard did, at first, have an intense reaction. He vomited violently, describing it as a purge, a huge release of trauma. So why are we talking about this on a faith-focused program? Well, it's mainly because of what happened next.
I came completely out of that state where I felt like I was purging for other people and felt an intense and probably indescribable connection to source, to the creator, and actually to Jesus. And I remember thinking, well, as I started to see like a matrix of colours, greens and reds, and I could see happiness and so much joy and love, and I just thought, well, wow, this is the energetic world that we never see. I'm seeing that.
And we'll return to Richard Butler's story later, asking why he felt he was very specifically connected to Jesus in that moment, and hearing the surprising impact he says it's had on his everyday religious practices. Well, this is Beyond Belief, where each week we take one person's journey and we take a look at what it tells us about the way in which faith and spirituality shape the world around us. Richard's story got us thinking about something that's being studied more and more, the connection between psychedelic drugs and spirituality. Harvard Divinity School has a project looking at psychedelics and the future of religion. And a lot of the studies into the medical effects of psychedelic drugs talk of participants experiencing spiritual connection. But we're talking about drugs that for the most part are currently illegal here. So why are more and more people traveling long distances to experience this? With us, we have a terrific panel to shed light on all of this. The Reverend Rita Powell is an Episcopalian priest and a chaplain at Harvard, but also took part in a study at Johns Hopkins University where they gave psilocybin, the active chemical in so-called magic mushrooms, to a group of religious leaders. Sounds like an interesting time. Reverend Powell, thank you so much for joining us from Cambridge in Massachusetts.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Ben Sessa is a psychiatrist who's been involved in psychedelic research in the UK since the late 90s and will help us, among other things, navigate the world of what's going on physiologically here. Dr. Sessa, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Aline. Great pleasure to be here.
And Dr. David Luke is Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Greenwich, who specifically looked into spirituality, psychedelics, and exceptional human experiences, and with whom we'll be talking a little bit about both the positive and negative sides of all of this, as we will with all our guests and spiritual traditions around the world that have embraced the use of drugs in some form. Dr. Luke, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Aline. Very pleased to be here.
Rita Powell, I said in your introduction you took part in that study that gave the active chemical found in magic mushrooms to religious leaders. Tell us a bit about that. How were you involved in that and what happened?
Well, it was an interesting journey, both the experience itself, but also the preparation for it, because I spent about a year considering whether or not it was ethical for me as a religious professional to participate in the study. There is so much language in my tradition and the Christian tradition that is suspicious of so-called shortcuts with something like psilocybin. So I had to spend quite a bit of time imagining whether it was really possible that God could possibly speak to me or communicate through such a framework. And I came to the conclusion that it was at least worth a try. And so I had the experience in 2016. Because these substances are being used in clinical trials to address specific therapeutic issues, but people were having recourse to mystical language to describe what happened to them, I think they began to be curious to see what would happen if people who were well-versed in spiritual language experienced these, and to sort of see what happened.
So it was qualitative research. It was about you describing your experiences afterwards.
Yes.
And what were they?
Well, in my case, it was very much one of unknowing, unsaying. It was an experience completely beyond sense perception, which wasn't what I was expecting, and I don't think it was what the study was necessarily expecting either.
How would you characterize those experiences of yours in terms of spirituality?
Well, I had the strong sense that it wasn't malevolent. It was a darkness experience that left me very curious. And I, that very summer, began a friendship with Dr. Charles Stang, who is the leader of the project that you mentioned at Harvard Divinity School. He introduced me to the world of theology of the darkness, which was a strain of the Christian tradition that I had not previously been exposed to.
We'll talk a little bit more later about what it was that ultimately made you decide to be a part of the study. But Dr. David Luke, of course, we're talking about substances that are illegal in this country, Class A and Class B drugs. Richard, we heard, went to Mexico to try ayahuasca, which contains the hallucinogen DMT. Are more people trying it specifically for spiritual purposes?
Yes, I think there are a range of motivations that people have when they're drawn to taking part in this kind of ceremonial psychedelic tourism. Often people are going because they've heard about the potential treatment for mental health issues, but often also people are going for spiritual enlightenment or connection, or to just re-establish their own faith or sense of meaning.
And I mentioned in the introduction, it's sort of been a byproduct of other research that's been looking at some of these drugs from a medical perspective, and that the findings have been that a lot of participants have had spiritual experiences, have felt spiritual connection. Is that what you found?
So in the research overall, the two things do not appear to be incidental, in that those people who do tend to have more mystical experiences seemingly have better clinical outcomes as well, in that we see usually a direct relationship between the intensity of their mystical experience and reductions in their symptoms, be it with addiction treatment and cravings, or depression, or anxiety, or end-of-life existential fear. So it seems to be part of the benefit of having mental health treatment with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy.
You mentioned mystical experiences. What are we talking about there?
So this has been framed within the scientific envelope, and it follows a Abrahamic definition mixed with kind of Eastern philosophies, and scientists have come together and kind of agreed upon a set of criteria. So a sense of unity with oneself and with the universe at large, a sense of ineffability, that it's very difficult to communicate the experience, that you are accessing some kind of ultimate truth about the nature of the universe, that it has a divine quality to it as well, that there is some transcendence of time and space, and deeply felt positive mood, so feelings of love, joy, bliss, ecstasy, etc.
Dr. Ben Sessa, you heard Richard's story there. How do you explain what he described, what was going on there?
Well, really interesting to hear Richard's story there. He described very much a typical classic psychedelic drug experience.
From a physiological point of view, is it possible to explain what's going on?
Well, I mean, as a scientist and a materialistic reductionist, I would argue that the spiritual experience that humans have is a feature and a factor of a complex algorithm. If you make neural networks complex enough, at first they'll come up with consciousness, and then a bit later they'll come up with spirituality. But actually, these are organic processes produced by organs, brains, and the consciousness and the spirituality is a byproduct of that complexity.
Please listen to BBC again and check out how many words and sentences you understand, and that will show that your English listening comprehension and understanding. As the more you listen, the more you understand. Be never demotivated. Take care.